This week, our parent organization, the Middle East Crisis Committee, created this banner against all kinds of Israeli torture against prisoners.
There was an initial interception between Sicily and Crete, what's called the Ionian Sea, which was an unprecedented in the history of the flotilla movement. I think the furthest anyone had been captured from Gaza was about 170 nautical miles. This was 650 nautical miles.
Hello, my name is Stanley Heller. Welcome to the Struggle Video News. We start with a tiny segment about Palestinian children playing. Nothing bad happens, it's just a little bit of sweetness.
You are my sunshine, my only sunshine. You make me happy when skies are gray. You'll never know, dear, how much I love you. Please don't take my sunshine away. The other night, dear, as I lay sleeping, I dreamed I held you in my arms. When I awoke, dear, I was mistaken, so I hung my head and cried.
With all the talk and warfare and ceasefire and threats about Iran's nuclear program, it pays to go back to the nuclear agreement that was arrived at when Obama was president. That agreement reduced Iran's enriched uranium to zero and had removed the advanced centrifuges from the country. But President Trump said that the Iran deal was, quote, one of the worst and most one-sided transactions the United States has ever entered into. His partisans complained that the U.S. gave Iran $1.7 billion in cash. Trump tore up the agreement in 2018. So that had all the inspectors leaving Iran, and Iran was free to enrich its uranium to any level it wanted. But what were Trump's actual objections? He spelled them out in this document. The thing is, almost all Trump's objections had nothing to do with Iran's nuclear program. He talked about missiles, he talked about Yemen, he demanded Iran stop talking about destroying Israel. He objected to what Iran was doing in Syria. He talked about human rights violations inside of Iran. Some of what he said was true, but it was irrelevant to Iran's nuclear program. Now, when it looks like a new deal will be some variant of Obama's deal, you should keep that in mind. The thousands of deaths, the hundreds of billions in costs for naught. Actually, less than nothing, because the U.S.-Israel war on Iran crippled Iran's democratic movement. And lo and behold, on May 29th, the New York Times reports that the draft deal includes a $300 billion investment fund for Iran. Astounding. Though I assume it's all talk and that no Iranian will see a penny. We've been talking about the rampant Israeli sexual assaults on prisoners that Nicholas Kristof wrote about in the New York Times. This week, the United Nations added Israel to the UN blacklist of countries that commit sexual violence in war zones. It was a report from the Office of the United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres about sexual violence in Gaza and the West Bank. I'll read just 2 sentences. The report said the cases the UN had verified were carried out against 14 men, 7 women, 9 boys, and 1 girl. The violations included rape, gang rape, forced nudity, and violence to genitals committed by officers from the Israeli military, police, and prison service. Of course, Netanyahu screamed anti-Semitism about this UN report. But do note that Hamas was added to last year's UN conflict-related sexual violence report. This week, our parent organization, the Middle East Crisis Committee, created this banner against all kinds of Israeli torture against prisoners. You see here a picture of Dr. Abu Safia from a year ago, from inside an Israeli prison. Also, the scores of captured men in Gaza stripped to undershorts. And a picture of last week, people on the Global Sumud Flotilla forced into a stress position as Ben Gvir laughed. We'll have it on display on the 31st at the Palestine Museum at the event for the flotilla at 3 p.m. Getting back to Nick Kristoff's New York Times piece, one of its sources was the Euromed Monitor. Israel has now blacklisted that group, denying its workers entry into Israel. I'll read from a tweet from one of those workers, Mohammed Shahada. Israel's government just blacklisted Euromed for exposing its systematic rape of Palestinians, just like Israel had terror listed Defense for Children International when they reported to the U.S. State Department Israel's rape of a child. Staff are fearful for their lives in Gaza and Lebanon. The blacklisting entails all current and former staff, including myself. Even junior staff and interns are targeted. Syria. This is a video of an unexploded bomb that was dropped by Assad forces on people in Ghouta, which is a Damascus suburb, in 2013. It held sarin. 1,500 Syrians were killed by sarin gas in one day in Ghouta. An American-Syrian doctor on a visit to Syria in 2017 was disappeared by Assad forces. His name was Dr. Majd Kalmomaz. After Assad's fascist government collapsed in 2024, it was learned that the doctor had been killed, but there were no other details. This week, it was discovered that he had been murdered in the notorious Sednaya prison and execution center. From the Twitter feed of the Global Sumud Flotilla, a post about what they call the torture boat, where people abducted, were beaten, and in some cases sexually assaulted. And some testimony.
So I have fractured ribs, and then I also have a collapsed lung, which I'm recovering from. Once we made it to the prison ship, everything went very violent. They dragged us around, and we were I didn't see anything, or our heads were always covered or pointing down, so we were very disorientated. They stripped our clothes. They only left one shirt on for everyone. They took my shoes as well, so I was barefoot. And then the next thing that happened is that I got thrown into a container where they kicked me, and they kept kicking for like quite some time, and like until I had like no more breath. And then I was like, yeah, screaming, but there was not much sound coming out. And then they threw me out, and then I was suddenly in the prison yard of the prison ship, and I was number 131. So there was 130 people who went through the container before me, and then we were treated like just intimidated all the time on the ship. They were flooding the floor. There's no medicine, nothing for pain killing. There is no sanitary wipes. There's no toilet paper. There was maybe half a liter of water per person. I remember they stepped on my foot in the container as well, and you could really feel they were trying to break the bones. They were just like purposely like trying to like damage people's bodies, like taking them out. I'm trying to remember where I've seen this scene, and I was like, oh yeah, it's like from Clockwork Orange, where they just in dark alleys just kick on people just for fun, like they're just getting joy out of the kicking.
Now this powerful audio-only statement by Mary Connolly, who took part in the flotilla. She is the sister of the President of Ireland.
I was on a warship, Claire, on Monday and Tuesday, which means we were kidnapped and abducted and held against our will on a warship, which was a prison ship, which was a horror of a concentration camp. Everybody was either handcuffed in ties to the front or the back. You were lucky if you were to the front. At least you could kneel down with your hands to the front. We were all bent down like hogs and kept in this position for hours. I have a huge burn on my back where the sun beat upon us for hours. Every time they came through, every time they picked up a ship, they were fired like rats onto ground. We were given no toilet paper, no medicines, nothing. They were cruel beyond, and they laughed at us the whole time. If they do this to Europeans in international waters, how dare they? What do they do to the poor Palestinian men and children? Hundreds and thousands of them in prison in Palestine. We had each other to wrap our arms around to warm in each other. We were not allowed to look up. We stared at the ground the whole time. They kicked you if you looked up. They would not look us in the eye. We were not human to them. How dare the Irish government allow this to happen? How dare they vote no to sanctions? It is utterly barbaric. I am ashamed of my Irish government. I am angry that we as Irish people who live such a privileged existence with 800 years of colonisation should have a government that back an Israeli state.
I'll be speaking with Liam. He took part in the Global Sumud Flotilla to try to deliver food and supplies to Gaza, an attempt that received a violent response from Israel. He'll be speaking tomorrow, Sunday, May 31st, at the Palestine Museum US in Woodbridge, Connecticut, at 3 o'clock. Good morning.
Hi, good morning, Stanley. Thank you for having me.
I don't want to duplicate your Sunday talk, so I want to just get into your background for a little bit and then speak some about the flotilla, let's say before the Israelis intercepted it. I understand you're a sailor and you were on the Clearwater professionally. Can you talk about that?
Yes. My name is Liam. I'm originally from upstate New York, and I've spent the last 10 years, basically most of my adult life, working in what people call tall ships, so large, traditionally rigged sailing vessels. And the Clearwater in particular, I've spent quite a lot of time on. For anyone who isn't familiar with it, it is a reproduction of a 19th century trading vessel. And it goes up and down the Hudson River, anywhere from Albany, New York to New York City, and runs educational programming. The boat is used as a platform for environmental education, mostly for elementary schoolers, but on up to adult continuing education groups. And I worked there in various contexts. I started there as a volunteer, I guess 11 years ago at this point, and just spent most of last year and the year before sailing as captain of that boat, running the educational program and operating the boat.
And it has a storied history. Its connection with trying to clean the Hudson River and Pete Seeger. Could you just talk about that a bit?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, Clearwater was started in part by a man named Pete Seeger, famed activist, part of the American labor movement, blacklisted as a communist, etc. He was a banjo player and an activist, and he always, I never had the pleasure of meeting him. He died the year before I first set foot on the Clearwater, but always told that he didn't like it when people said that the Clearwater was his boat. He said it was the people's boat, but
Ah,
nonetheless, he was strongly associated with it. And his work as a musician helped raise a lot of the money to build it, and so it's long had a legacy as a space for activists, and that continues to this day. A lot of the crew are people who are drawn to it because of that legacy, and are people who are often in leftist spaces and people who are hoping to use education and advocacy as tools to try to affect change in the world, positive change. um,
right. So how did one get from the Hudson River to work for Gaza and Palestine? What's your background?
Yeah, so the flotilla, this iteration of flotilla, which was organized by an organization called the Global Sumud Flotilla, they had done another similar project in September of last year, and as you are aware, and maybe some of the people watching this video are aware, it's just the most recent stage in a long history of people trying to break the blockade on Gaza. Um, Israel has imposed a blockade on Gaza, I believe, since 2008. Um, so long before the start of the most recent hostilities, and people have been trying to break through that blockade, which has at various points been declared illegal. It was declared an act of collective punishment under the Geneva Convention or the Geneva Code, and so civilian-led efforts have been trying to break that blockade to bring aid to the people of Gaza for a long time. And this is the most recent iteration, and it was the largest one ever done by far, involving more than 50 boats. It actually would have involved a lot more, but there was a first sort of initial interception by the Israelis that captured 22 boats.
Let me
But
go
in any
back a
case,
step, if
yeah,
I may go back a step. How did you get interested in Palestine? Where
oh,
did
sure.
this come up in your activism?
So yeah, I just as a young man learned about uh, Palestine. I had the privilege of going to a very effective public school, and I learned, I think, a lot of things that some people in the U.S. education system don't have the luxury of learning. And I remember, basically, I think I was in 10th grade, learning about the British Mandate period in the Near East and the creation of the modern boundaries of the nations that exist there now, Syria, Jordan, Iraq, etc., and learning about Israel at that time, and learning about Palestine, and learning about the struggle of the Palestinians and the sort of the initial creation of the Israeli state, and the Nakba, the Nakba. My Arabic is not great, but the original, the catastrophe, as it means in English. And yeah, I generally had like a sort of anti-colonial stance, which continues to this day. And so I was aware of the struggle of the Palestinians. I was not necessarily involved in direct actions related to the Palestinian cause. I was more doing stuff closer to home. I've been a little bit involved with Black Lives Matter, NYPD going by. Black Lives Matter, and work with some indigenous groups in New York. But a friend of mine was involved with the flotilla, and she said basically they need people who know how to sail, and they need people who understand boats. And they also need people who are willing to teach people how to sail, because the majority of the participants in the flotilla are selected for their ability to generate media attention. There's politicians, there's influencers. We also brought people who had medical training to help care for the people on the boats, and so on. And so they were in pretty keen need, since it was such a large project, for people who understood how to sail, and understood how to operate boats, and also understood how to keep people who didn't know how to operate boats safe, which is basically what I do for a living. So I said, that sounds like a great opportunity for me to use my professional skills to help something I believe in. And so that's why I signed up.
Great. So where did you join the flotilla? What the port?
I joined in Italy. So There were boats that departed from Spain, Italy, Greece, and Turkey. The Spanish boats obviously departed earlier and worked their way east across the Mediterranean, rendezvoused with us in Italy, and then we kept going. And so I was in Italy for about a month, helping prepare the boats, and then I was sailing from there.
And when did the first effort then try to get to Gaza? Around what day, what month?
So, sorry, could you repeat that question? I didn't quite hear it.
So when was the effort made first to actually get to Gaza by the boats?
So the final leg, as it were, departed from Marmaris, Turkey. I believe it was the 15th of May. Or no, it was the 14th. Sorry. And that was the kind of final leg. We moved along the Turkish coast for a little while, for about a day and a half, and then we turned southeast, left the coast, and ventured across the sort of open sea, across the Mediterranean, heading towards Gaza. And we were started to be captured and intercepted. I believe it was the 18th.
And this is the final time, but
Yes.
there was an earlier effort and you were stopped then, is that right?
Yes. So yeah, as the fleet moved east, so the Spanish ships had joined the Italian ships, and we had departed from Italy. There was an initial interception between Sicily and Crete, what's called the Ionian Sea, which was an unprecedented in the history of the flotilla movement. I think the furthest anyone had been captured from Gaza was about 170 nautical miles. This was 650 nautical miles. So extremely, very far away. It was still international waters. It's not, I don't know that it's necessarily any more illegal than it is if we're only 170 miles, but it certainly was very brazen and without precedent in the Israeli military's efforts to prevent the flotillas from reaching Gaza. It was quite far. So yeah, I was captured along with my two friends, Bridget and Freddie. Hopefully Bridget will still be joining us tomorrow. I'm not sure. She's already returned to work and apparently has some stuff to take care of this weekend. But in any case, the three of us, along with about 180 other people, were captured along with 22 boats in the Ionian Sea, about 50 miles or a little bit less west of Crete, and 650 miles from Gaza.
And they didn't take you to Israel that time. Where did they put you?
They handed us over to the Greek Coast Guard, and we were deposited in Crete, where many of us ended up returning home. I, because of my maritime capabilities, was offered a position on one of the boats that was departing from Greece, and I took that opportunity and continued on with the mission.
And then you did the last leg, and
Yes,
we're going to hear about those rather grim details tomorrow. I really appreciate you talking with me.
Yeah, I appreciate you, Stanley, and I hope that anybody who watches this, remembers that the struggle is ongoing, and there's a lot that we can still do for Palestine right now. And I think hopefully just capitalizing on some of the momentum from the media attention from the flotilla to help continue pushing change, especially in Europe, where there's been a lot of public outrage and outrage from governments there.
I swear I felt I'm gonna die, and I literally was saying my shahada.
Likat Cordeya spent a year and 3 days in ICE detention and was released earlier this year. During her stay, she suffered from a seizure and did not receive medical attention until after she was better. Cordeya sat down with Middle East Eye and recounted the day that she thought she was going to die.
When I got sick, when I was very sick and I had this really bad fever, and medical didn't care about me, didn't show up, didn't see me, the ladies around me, they took care of me. I literally felt that night of having a fever, I swear I felt I'm gonna die. And I literally was saying my shahada. But I was asking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for forgiveness and saying my shahada and saying, literally, I felt like this is going to be my last night.
Cordeya says that despite having a seizure and a high fever, her medical needs were neglected. With no access to basic medication, she says the women around her took care of her.
The ladies helped me to be better. But when I was feeling miserable, that night, and I was really in deep pain. Like when I say that it was really painful. It was really painful, and I had really bad headache. I swear, I felt I'm gonna die that night.
Earlier this month, Cordea was hospitalized after another seizure. Once someone has a seizure, they cannot drive until they pass 6 months seizure-free in the state of New Jersey, limiting Licotte's independence and ability to get back to normalcy. Licotte points to the extreme conditions she faced in detainment that led to her body reaching its breaking point. She wrote in a post on Instagram, "My body was pushed past its limits. Lack of sleep, lack of proper nutrition, constant stress. No one should walk out of a detention center with a medical condition that could follow them for the rest of their life." Licotte walked into ICE detainment never having had a seizure in her life, and now doctors are telling her she will need to be medicated for potentially the next 10 years.
Thousands of Palestinians remain held illegally in Israeli detention. Among them, over 100 Palestinian medics, including the director of Kamal Adwan Hospital, Dr. Hussam Abu Safia. Today we're joined by medics and activists, including some medics who have been to Gaza and saved lives there. Detaining health workers and the wholesale destruction of Gaza's healthcare system is a war crime. And it's a war crime that you only commit if your intention is to maximize civilian casualties and enact a genocide against the Palestinian people. Some medics have been able to get into Gaza and save lives and work in hospitals there, and we are joined by some of them today.
People continue to die despite the ceasefire. People continue to die because the healthcare system has been destroyed and because these specialists are still being held in detention. We have also been in touch with the head of Al Auda Hospital. He messaged us yesterday to describe his experiences while he was in detention. Juliet is very kindly going to read a translation of his words for us today.
I implore you to raise your voices to those in power, to all relevant international organizations, so that pressure can be brought to bear on decision makers to release the Palestinian doctors and other detainees from the Gaza Strip who have committed no sin except that they own this place on the earth.
Now, an interview I did with Liam, who was a sailor on one of the flotilla boats.